Hey, Jay Carper again. Reading from Proverbs 24, verses 17 and 18. Do not rejoice when your enemy falls, and do not let your heart be glad when he stumbles, lest Yahweh see it, and it displease him, and he turn away his wrath from him. You know, Yeshua said to love your enemies as yourself. But that doesn't mean that you should help your enemies win victories over you. It doesn't mean that you should let them walk all over you. But let me read to you a couple of other verses just to kind of put some perspective on this. Let me go to Leviticus 26, verse 7. You will chase your enemies, and they will fall by the sword before you. 5 of you shall chase 100, and 100 of you shall put 10,000 to flight. Your enemies shall fall by the sword before you. For I will look on you favorably, and make you fruitful, multiply you, and confirm my covenant with you. That's clearly a good thing with your enemies falling before you. God is giving you victory. And shouldn't we rejoice when God gives us victory? Let me read another one. 2 Chronicles 20, verses 27 and through 29. Then they returned, every man of Judah and Jerusalem, with Jehoshaphat in front of them, to go back to Jerusalem with joy, for Yahweh had made them rejoice over their enemies. So they came to Jerusalem with stringed instruments and harps and trumpets to the house of Yahweh, and the fear of God was on all the kingdoms of those countries, when they heard that Yahweh had fought against the enemies of Israel. Did you notice that it said, God made them rejoice over their enemies? But Solomon says, don't rejoice over your enemies when they fall. What does this mean? How can we both rejoice over our enemies when they fall and not rejoice over them when they fall? And let me read a couple of more verses to give you even more perspective and hopefully not more confusion. Exodus 23, verses 4 and 5. If you meet your enemy's ox and his donkey going astray, you shall surely bring it back to him again. If you see the donkey of one who hates you lying under its burden, and you would refrain from helping it, you shall surely help him with it. So you're supposed to help your enemy recover his lost goods. And when he's struggling, when his animals or whatever is in his charge is struggling, help him with it, even if he hates you. Now, Leviticus 19, verses 17 through 18. You shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall surely rebuke your neighbor and not bear sin because of him. You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the children of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am Yahweh. And one more. This one from Yeshua himself, and I mentioned it earlier, but I forgot to bookmark it. Matthew 5, 5 verses 43 to 44. Just 2 verses. You have heard it that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies, bless those who curse you, do good to those who hate you, and pray for those who spitefully use you and persecute you. Well, let me read one more verse. That you may be sons of your Father in heaven, for he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. It is unquestionably a good thing to rejoice when God gives you victory over your enemies, when he releases you from oppression, when he destroys the wicked and frees a people from an oppressive ruler or from an evil judge. That's a good thing, and we should rejoice about that. We should rejoice when God delivers us from an invading army, gives us victory over people who would want to do us harm. If someone invades your house, wants to hurt your family, defend yourself. You have every right, and you should rejoice when you are victorious over someone who has invaded your home and wants to hurt you and your family. But that's different than holding a grudge. It's different than wanting someone else to hurt simply because you don't like them or they don't like you or something bad happened between you. Even if you have an enemy who's an unbeliever, who wants to do you harm, even someone who invades your home and wants to kill you and your family or hurt you, Rejoice over victory, but don't gloat. Don't rejoice that that person is suffering. Don't rejoice in their pain. It's one thing to be grateful to God for delivering you. It's another thing altogether to be grateful that God is making another person hurt and suffer. Don't gloat. Don't be petty. Don't wish harm on other people just because they're your enemies. Don't be glad that they hurt. Be glad that you have been delivered, that God has rescued you. And maybe pray for that other person, that God will rescue him too. Rescue him from his own sins, from his hatred, from the violence that's in his heart. And that's what it means to love your enemy. This is Jay Carper from American Torah. Be blessed.